Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Steer Clear podcast. We're back for episode 5. I'm your host, Don Capps, part of Belly Up Racing and Belly Up Sports. We have a very good show for you today. Got a lot to talk about from Martinsville. Some things happened during the week. We're going to talk about Pocono Double-header next year. John Hunter Nemecheck, he'll be driving in the Cup Series for the remainder of the season for Matt Tifft. And today was announced Brandon Jones will be in the 19 car again next season. We'll also preview Texas at the end of the show. I want to welcome back Wesley Riddle. How's it going, Wes?
What's up, man? Good to be back for the second time so far.
Yeah, our first repeat guest on the Steer Clear podcast. As we're recording this episode, it is Halloween night, so maybe this show will get a little spooky. I think Brandon Jones being in the Xfinity series is pretty spooky.
I'm with you. Oh, I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, he did get that win at Kansas 2 weeks ago, but, probably not the most deserving win. Definitely had a lot go his way, had some leaders wreck, had some lap cars help him out, all that, And then just I don't know how that guy is still – it's got to be the money. It's got to be the money. There's no way it's not the money.
Oh, 100%. I don't think there's any other way around it, because if you look at where he was and then where he ended up, he leapfrogged from Richard Childress, which is pretty strong in Xfinity, but went to Joe Gibbs, which is also pretty equally as strong. So it's going to be interesting to see how he fares with another season, because I think at this point we could see, or I feel like we'd expect to see improvement, and we have seen a win this year, which is pretty solid, but I don't know if that shows any real signs of improvement, because if you look at this year alone, he's already racked up maybe 7 or 8 DNFs in one season, and that's with Joe Gibbs' equipment, which has to take a big toll out of the pocket. And he's had quite a bit of DNQs throughout his entire career, no matter how you want to approach it or how you want to look at it, which is definitely not the kind of name you want to put to yourself, even driving for a good team, because I did look at this from 2017 to 2019. Brandon Jones actually ranks 11th on the list out of every Xfinity driver when it comes to did not finishes, which is pretty ridiculous. He's tied with Joey Gase and ahead of guys like Josh Williams, Carl Long, Garrett Smithley, Jeremy Clements, Vinnie Miller, all these guys that usually are guys that you consider almost starting parks. So we'll have to see what he's able to do. It'll be an interesting move, but hopefully he has a good year. But then again, I don't think we've seen really any improvements besides the win that we did see. It's just there's not really a whole lot of change in momentum that we've seen from him since his beginnings in 2016.
Yeah, Brandon Jones, definitely a driver to look out for next year. Maybe he'll look better next year because, Christopher Bell is just beating him to the ground, being teammates and what Christopher Bell has done. And you look at it was kind of crazy with the whole Matt Tifft and Brandon Jones situation. They kind of just flip-flop rides after 2017. Tifft went from Gibbs to RCR, and then you had Jones go from RCR to Gibbs. I felt like it was more of a benefit for Tifft somehow. He somehow ran better with the Richard Childress racing equipment. But, we'll talk about Matt Tifft a little more later. I think Brandon Jones has gotten enough of the spotlight. You can't buy time here right now. If he wants to buy some time on this podcast, he's more than willing to pay to have a slot in here. But we'll move on to the first Data 500, obviously won by Martin Truex Jr. Absolutely dominating performance, leading 464 out of 500 laps. Just, we thought what Brad Keselowski did in the spring was just untouchable. No, we wouldn't see that again at Martinsville, and then Truex ends up doing better than what Keselowski did in the spring. It's unbelievable for Truex, who came into this year, never won at a short track, and I think this is his third short track win of the year. Definitely his first at Martinsville. definitely strong outing for Truex. And now, I mean, he's on to the Final Four. He doesn't have to worry about points or anything. He can go out here to Texas and ISM, just kind of ride around, just kind of go for a win. I think his biggest deal now is just not to make any enemies.
Oh, 100%. It was just an outclass of a performance. Martin Truex Jr. It's good for him because after last year, we saw that a lot of emotions took over, kind of in the race, and then after the race, and then of course it led to the championship and where he finished second after his run-in with Joey Logano, after almost pretty much dominating that race too, and now coming back the year later, leading 464 laps. That's incredible. I think they said that was second all time with laps led in a race, or the second best percentage led in comparison or with the alongside the total laps. So there was 500 total, almost led every single lap. It looked really, really good for Martin Truex, seeing that. Also, that was his first Martinsville win. We've seen him do good there, as I mentioned last year, but now he finally was able to pull one off. And you talked about how he's shown really good success this year at the short tracks and also pretty much at all the mile and a halves. And of course, we've got Texas coming up next week, another track he's great at, and ISM and Homestead. So I think that the momentum that his team has, a lot of people have been talking about Denny Hamlin, and pretty much I would say just Denny Hamlin being the other strong championship contender at the moment coming into that race. But then Truex just kind of put everybody on hold for a second and showed that he might be just don't forget about him, because he has had a lot of victories this year and is looking pretty unstoppable at the moment. So we'll have to see how Truex does coming up, likely well, but I think that there's a good shot that he'll have to win the championship when we get to Homestead.
Yeah, it's kind of outstanding what Martin Truex Jr. is able to do. Leading 464 laps. It's incredible. And, it's actually funny. I mean, that's not even the highest percentage of laps. I mean, it is the most laps he's ever led, but it's not even the highest percentage of laps he's led in the race. He did that one back in 2016 at the Coke 600, where he ended up leading 392 of 400 laps. I mean,
it's just incredible.
She's put an absolute whooping on the field. And it just shows what he's done since this switch to Toyota and this whole Gibbs alliance. Well, it was a Gibbs alliance then. Now he's with Gibbs. Martin Truex Jr., that's his third win of the playoffs. He's looking strong at the right times now. He's got momentum on his side. Now he's got Homestead to focus at. Last year he arguably had the best car in the long runs. He had the best car back in 2017. So, Truex, it's looking good for Martin Truex Jr. He's going to be a tough one to beat in Miami, depending on who goes there. I can't count out Martin Truex. The whole team, Cole Pern, just amazing connection between the whole team. It's just we haven't had actually in the field right now, we don't have a multi-time champion outside of Jimmy Johnson, which is hard to believe. All the other champions in the field now only have one championship. So you got to look at Martin Truex Jr. as that guy to maybe break that barrier and get to a second championship. I feel like it's just been a brick wall that everyone has failed to get through except for Jimmy Johnson.
Right. Thinking back, and it's crazy to think that Johnson, well, he won a few years ago the championship, but every driver in between when Johnson wasn't winning has yet to repeat a championship. Excuse me. And when we look at this field that we have currently in the playoffs, we've got still guys that are going to contend for the championship, or potentially that could lock themselves in, that haven't even won one yet. And that includes guys like Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, and Chase Elliott, because we've already seen Kevin Harvick and Logano seal theirs up, Kyle Busch seal one up, and Martin Truex Jr., as we just had mentioned, win the championship a couple years ago. So it would be good to see Martin Truex Jr., especially what he's been throughout his entire career. He's had his ups and downs, and he had downs for a long, long time. Finally, these past few years, he's been able to get with a great team, with two great teams, and build his resume back up. And when you look at the Homestead race, there's only been 2 races out of his 14 that he's finished outside of the top 30. And not even that, just that, but those races he finished, they're the only 2 outside of the top 20. Every other time he's finished inside, has multiple top 5s and multiple top 10s, and that dates all the way back to his first race in 2006. If you exclude his first ever start in or second start in 2004, didn't have a good finish there, but in his rookie year, he finished second at Homestead. And last year he finished second, and then won in 2017 with the championship. So I think he's going to be, like you, a strong contender when we get to Homestead. And I think it would take a freak accident for it to take him out of a chance to win, because I'm almost certain that we will see him contend for the lead and the victory and the championship once we get a Homestead.
Yeah, it's very interesting looking at Martin Truex Jr. He's only missed the Final Four 2 times. It was the first year in 2014 and in 2016. He didn't make it to the championship 4. Other than that, this is going to be his 3rd year in a row in the championship 4. And other than Kyle Busch, really, you haven't seen that consistency of getting to the Final Four. So Martin Truex Jr. absolutely just putting on a clinic the past, ever since he's gotten into the 78. Just an absolute clinic. Arguably one of the best teams during that span, I'd say from about 2016 on. Definitely, I think he's probably been the best driver, most consistent driver and team on the track. So it's going to be hard to beat Martin Truex Jr. at Homestead. Definitely going to be tough to beat him, especially with all the preparation they're going to have. And now being just a Joe Gibbs car alone, it's insane what that 19 team's going to do. And, talk about Homestead, 2 names come up when you talk about the championship 4, and that's Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano. Before I do my take on this, I want to hear your perspective of what you saw go down between Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano.
I thought it was interesting what conspired, because both of the incidents kind of involved Hamlin roughing up Logano a little bit. I actually missed the first one live. I did not see it the first probably 2/3 of the race, but I was able to catch the second half, or the second third, or the final third, excuse me, and saw them kind of exchange their shots. And I'm not really a big fan of seeing an individual push somebody and then walk away. If you're going to push somebody, you better do it when you first walk up, because if you push somebody and walk away, you're going to have something coming. And of course, Hamlin tried to go after Logano after that incident, and things didn't kind of escalated from there. We saw a lot of penalties get thrown out. I think all of them to the crew members that were involved. And of course, that comes up to talk. Should crew members get involved in confrontations between I almost said fighters, but of course, two drivers? And I don't think so, because we saw one man almost, essentially assault Denny Hamlin and then assault somebody else, which could have put just a major blow on everything. If Hamlin were to have been hurt, then he would have been out of the championship. But then again, we could go ahead and say, well, Logano and Hamlin could have hurt themselves just trying to go at it if the crew weren't involved. So it was an interesting incident, and I think that's going to set up a really interesting playing field for these final 2 races before the championship, to see how they treat each other on the track, because neither one of them can really afford a big mistake or a wreck, because the cut line is still extremely close. Chase Elliott's pretty much out of the picture, I'd say. But if you look from Kyle Larson up, I think everybody still has a chance. So that's 1 through 7. And Logano and Hamlin are currently in, but there's a chance that if they were to get in an incident on the track and it costs one of them, not only will we probably see a fight, but we'll probably see one of them fall below the cutoff line. So I think that it's important that they kind of put away what happened and just focus on the championship, because a fight isn't going to win you a championship. Going out there and performing is what's going to do it.
Yeah. And we actually talked about this. It was me and Rob last week that talked about pit crew members and getting involved in fights. And I said they got to stay out of it. You let the drivers do what they got to do. If they they do something stupid, it's on them. They're going to cost themselves. But when you get these crew members involved, it just sets up for more injury. I mean, you get these piles of people. I mean, people can get crushed in this. I mean, it's ridiculous. You just got to let them be. If anything, you just let the NASCAR officials break it up. That's what you got to do. You can't be letting these crew members get in there. And that Penske crew member for Joey Logano that got suspended was Dave Nichols Jr. He ended up basically horse collaring Denny Hamlin to the ground. Yeah, like it was a pretty aggressive like throwdown too. So it's almost as if he was going after him. It would have been another thing if it was one of Hamlin's crew members just kind of dragging him out, but this was one of Logano's crew members throwing him to the ground. So he meant some intent with that, and he's been suspended for Texas. Could have been suspended for the rest of the year, honestly, but they decided not to. Like you said, Logano doing what he did, he kind of asked for it by pushing Hamlin and then walking away. It's typical Joey Logano stuff. He's done it before. I mean, he thinks he could talk, and then when someone wants to fight, he won't do it. He'll run, get some behind some crew members, throw a water bottle. As Tony Stewart knows pretty well. So you look at it. I can't see anything, too crazy happening after this. And, Hamlin did run him up into the wall. So I understand, Logano going over to talk. But it's nothing Joey Logano hasn't done to anybody else.
Exactly.
We saw it just last year. I mean, he just threw Martin Truex out of the way after Truex raced him clean to pass him. And Logano, he spun out Matt Kenseth at Kansas when he really didn't need to win. He had already locked himself in. So Logano is not the cleanest racer whatsoever. I mean, he sent Hamlin to the hospital in 2013 because, he didn't care about winning. He just made sure Hamlin didn't win. And it's just something Logano, those Penske guys, outside of Ryan Blaney, they have a reputation for being, aggressive drivers, and it leads to some dirty situations that lets, I almost say karma strike them back. But I mean, these two, I doubt anything will come out of this. I think they're both focused on the championship. They're not going to, especially Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin's not going to do anything. I think he's in the best mindset he's been in his whole career. I think that interview showed it. Like, he was just mocking Joey Logano. I don't think he does that. Like, I'm sure he just rants on Joey Logano. He doesn't do like that interview if this is a few years ago. Got a laugh out of the crowd. 2 years ago, it was, everyone booing him. This year, he had everyone cheering for him. So Hamlin winning back some of the crowd, maybe that's why he did it too. He knows Joey Logano's not a light driver. And I think Hamlin earned some respect back from the hometown fans.
Oh, 100%. I think it was a good to see Hamlin get a little bit more support for him after what happened a couple of years ago. But I think you're right. I hope that no other incidents are going to happen between the two. Heck, they might save it for next year, if anything. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised to a degree if they start roughing each other up, because this is the playoffs, and they're not going to show a lot of respect to their competitors because they're going to be trying to do the best that they can. But then again, like you said, they're focused on the championship. I think it'll be interesting to see. Maybe not so much at Texas. I don't know how they're going to both fare at Texas with the package, but I think Phoenix is going to be a place where we see a lot more close racing. Or not close racing, but a little bit more beating and banging, with Texas being so much higher in speed. But I think it'll be interesting to see kind of, I don't know, how they take things over the next 3 weeks, and then we get a Homestead, and then everything goes down for the Final Four, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's say if one of them isn't in the Final Four, how will they treat the other when we get to Homestead when it comes to trying to make a pass, or if one of the other is out in front and the playoff driver is trying to get past. So, I think things could get interesting to a degree, maybe, if something happens or sparks up again. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
So the biggest thing, I have two things here. With Joey Logano, the result in, he kind of his rode around there, had the flat tire, and he spun it out. So he didn't lose a lap, stayed on the lead lap, and he ended up finishing eighth, which was only about 2 or 3 spots off of where he was running all day. So it really didn't cost him too much. It wasn't like when Chase Elliott went from first to like 20th or something. He still finished eighth. It's kind of where he deserved to finish. He didn't run really up in the top 5 the whole race. So Logano really didn't lose too much out of it. And then here's one thing for Denny Hamlin. I think he's going to learn. Because back in 2017 when he was racing Chase Elliott there at the end at Phoenix, I think because Hamlin had a couple points to spare. He was in the championship 4 at the time. And I feel like he's going to learn this year. If Logano is going to try to pass him, I think you're just better off just letting him go. You cannot risk
100%.
him trying to run you up into the wall if he's under you, or turning you if he's behind you, because he raced Chase Elliott hard for a couple laps, and Chase Elliott just basically stopped turning off 4 and threw him into the wall, and that's what ended his season.
100%.
So I think Denny Hamlin, if he, depending on the point situation, if he's like maybe 5 to 10 points to the good and it's late in the race and Logano's breathing down your neck, you just let him go. You just let him go, unless I guess if it's for the win, and if he wins, it knocks you out situation. But if you're running in 5th place and he's trying to pass you, I just let him go. Don't give him the chance to mess you up.
Oh, 100%. That's a good point to make because you did point out the Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin situation to where Hamlin did not make the playoffs that year, and it cost him a chance at winning a championship in a season that he was doing pretty solid in overall. So I think you nailed that on the head. If that happens, and it could also be next week too. You're never 100% certain. I mean, that extra point could do you good at Texas, but then again, would you rather risk it and see what happens by trying to defend your spot, or would you rather just let it go and try to make up that one spot next week? Because Joe Gibbs has looked great, and I think that maybe just that even giving up a point may just pay its due in the end. So I don't know. I think it would be hard to might be hard to make a decision at Texas, but like you said, at Phoenix, that seems like the best option to do.
Yeah, and now you got the crew. I mean, you know how much this season means to Chris Gabehart. I mean, Gabehart, he prevented Hamlin from going back after Joey Logano. I mean, it's just the things like that. Gabehart knows what he's doing, and he knows they have a serious shot at winning the championship, and they just cannot mess it up. The team right now, I think the distractions are done. I don't think they're gonna let this hang over. I don't know about the Penske guys, because Logano in his past has held some stuff. He'll hold over stuff. He won't let that stuff go. So that'll be interesting to see as we move on. Another incident, though, that now involves a playoff driver and a non-playoff driver, Kyle Busch and Aric Almirola. So basically, they made some contact. Almirola ended up hitting the wall. He was done for the day. Kyle Busch ended up keeping it off the wall and stayed in the race. He ended up finishing 11th, I believe. And Aric Almirola, after the wreck, said he was going to make Kyle Busch's life a living hell the next 3 weeks. What do you think about that one?
It's an interesting take because I did see the wreck. I never really saw what happened or transpired before the fact, but I think it's a lot of combination from both drivers at the moment for where they stand at this point in the season. Because if you look at Kyle Busch, this second half has not really been the best for him, even though he did good at Darlington, he did good at Richmond, did good at Bristol, Kansas, and Dover. But then every other race in between, he's kind of struggled a little bit. He's had a couple DNFs that we never saw out of him in the first half of the season where he was just dominating. And then you look at Aric Almirola, and this second half of the year, he had a great first half, or pretty consistent first half, as he did last year. But this second half hasn't matched at all what he was able to put together last year, and especially in the playoffs. He's only had one top 10, and that was a 4th place at Talladega this second half of the year since the Kentucky race, kind of in the summer. And you look at last year, Almirola was up there competing for wins at Dover and at Richmond and won at Talladega, and at Phoenix he was really strong. So it's I think that when they look at where they've been last year at this point and seeing kind of where they are now, the emotions have kind of taken over a little bit, and they need to both kind of get on the right mindset. But it's interesting. We'll have to see if Almirola. I mean, he finished all top tens here last year, but then again, like I said, I don't know if he's going to be able to get back to the path that he had with Stuart Haas in 2018. And a reminder, he finished fifth in points last year because he had such a strong final 10 races. But I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm not sure if anything is going to conspire too much from this. Seeing that Kyle Busch is in the playoffs and Almirola maybe had a little more time to cool down, but another instance of we'll just kind of have to wait and see what's going to boil down, because we now have two kind of interesting takes from the Hamlin-Logano incident and this one as to what's going to is any payback going to occur at these final two tracks before the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. For Aric Almirola, it's definitely got to be emotions. And again, he did, post something this week. He said something about his son was actually a Kyle Busch fan, and he said it's not like that anymore. So I don't know if he's trying to get in his head or trying to do anything. I'm not sure. But if you're Aric Almirola, it's not going to be a good look if you end up doing something to cost Kyle Busch. Definitely not the right guy to mess with. If you're Aric Almirola, you just need to settle down, do what you've been doing all year, try to win a race here before the season's out. Because if you worry about Kyle Busch, then things aren't going to look good, and it's only going to hurt you. Because Kyle Busch he's got the better career, he's got the better car, he's going to outrun you. There's just no reason to be foolish and get into Kyle Busch.
I definitely agree with that, and you're right. Aric should look forward. Phoenix, one of his best tracks. I mean, he's finished in the top 10 there the past 5 races in a row. Both the last 2 races, 4th place. Just focus on getting a win and trying to rebuild that momentum for your team and move on and let Kyle focus on the championship, because as you did mention, Kyle's not the guy you really want to tick off. And it's unfortunate that, of course, Kyle was the one that it kind of occurred with Kyle, because Almirola has always kind of been a pretty reserved and respected guy in the garage, and now it's a guy that has a pretty loyal fan base that I think he upset a little bit. But both guys should just look forward to these final 3 races, Busch hunting down the championship and Almirola hunting down his first win of the year.
Yeah, definitely not the right situation here for either driver. And, actually a pretty good situation next year at Pocono. Pocono, they announced the doubleheader for next year, and I'm going to try to go to it. Pocono is only about 2 hours away from my house, so I think I'm going to try to attend the races there. Friday, here's the layout. Friday, they're going to have cup practice and qualifying for the first cup race, and then they'll have truck practice and qualifying. Then on Saturday, they're going to have Xfinity practice, the truck race, which is 200 miles, and then they'll have a 325 mile cup race. And then you move on to Sunday, you'll have the Xfinity qualifying, then the Xfinity race, which is 225 miles. Then you're going to have the second cup race, which is 350 miles, so 25 miles more than the first race on Saturday. And the lineup for Sunday's cup race will be inverted of the lead lap cars from Saturday's finish. So if you have 23 cars finish on the lead lap, the 23rd place finisher will start on the pole for the Sunday race. And lap cars, they'll start behind them just by order of finish. So if you finish 24th the lap down, that's where you're going to start. Teams are going to end up using the same cars for both races. They're going to be impounded after qualifying Friday, so no major changes after qualifying on Friday. Then teams can work on the cars following the race Saturday. And then they'll have to go through tech again on Sunday. So basically, it's almost like a 325 mile per hour practice that counts, because they'll be able to, make some changes after the first race. Again, having to meet, pre-race tolerances and tech Sunday morning. teams would have to use the same engine, so the same long block, the engine block, the crankshaft, the camshaft, the connecting rods, pistons, oil pans, cylinder heads, and valves for both races, but they can change valve springs. And if there is damage, teams can go to the backup car for Sunday. They'll just have to start at the rear as in any other normal weekend. And teams will use the same pit stall for both races. So winning the pole for the first race is big because you get that last pit stall for both races. So after hearing and seeing all of this information, Wes, how you feel about Pocono next year?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited for a little bit of a change because it's unfortunate that track is one of the more, I guess, disliked out of the entire series, and that's because the I don't know, the way the cars space out has always been a little bit different. Of course, it's not a quarter mile or a half mile or not a quarter mile, but a mile and a half. It's just a different track on the schedule, but I think it'll be nice to see a little bit of a change, and it'll be interesting. I'm really interested, especially in the inverted field order, to see how that'll play off. We talked a little bit before the show. I was looking at the other results from this year, and in the spring race that happened, or I guess it was the early summer race, that would have put Bubba Wallace and Michael McDowell on the front row with 21 cars on the lead lap, and Kyle Busch thus starting in 21st. Or if you were to compare that with the July race, that would have put Michael McDowell once again on the front row, but this time on the pole, and Daniel Suarez second with 25 cars, and putting the winner that would have been Denny Hamlin back there in 25th spot. So of course it's just a hypothetical looking forward, but it'll be interesting to see. So I think we could assume somewhere between maybe 20 and like 26 cars having the field inverted, with the remaining lap down cars being pinned, of course, a lap down. And aside from that, I think it's good that they'll be able to use a backup in case they do wreck, because of course it is two separate races. It's not the same race. I think it'd be different if it was on the same day. If it was on the same day, then it maybe make a little bit more sense to just have that car be out of the race, because it was kind of I feel like that way it's more of like a kind of heat style, but this is two different races taking place on two different days. So it's an interesting look. I think it's an interesting track that they chose it for, but I think it does make a little bit of sense. There's a lot more space for them to work. There's less of the chance for the drivers that do get inverted to the back to potentially get into trouble. Running with or getting around again the slower cars that are up in front, but I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a nice change. I just have to hope that everything goes according to plan.
Yeah, definitely going to make the first race pretty important for the guys that are near trying to fight for the lead lap. I think it's going to make those cars run harder to stay on the lead lap, knowing that if they do stay on the lead lap, they're going to be rewarded with a good starting spot the next day. And like you said, they have to use the backup cars if they do wreck the first race, because these are two separate races. There are 120 points on the line in this weekend. If someone wins, sweeps all the stages and wins both races, I mean, that's 120 points right there. That's a lot of points on the line in one weekend. It definitely is going to be, I think it's going to bring in more people for Pocono because they're going to be interested, and they're going to get to see about 675 miles of racing. I'd sign up for that. And that's just Cup Series alone. You get a Truck Series race before the Cup Series race on Saturday, and then an Xfinity race on the Sunday with the Cup race. I think that's just perfect for the fans. Pocono, definitely a good track to test this out. And you never know in the future, maybe another track picks up this idea, maybe a Dover or, a New Hampshire or another track that has two dates that they're trying to, just kind of minimize it into one. And then, that also leads to, the conversation of expanding maybe to midweek races. I don't know what your opinion is on that. How would you feel about midweek races, like a Wednesday night showdown or something?
I think that would be a terrific idea. I've always kind of wanted a midweek race because it's a nice way to kind of break up and have something different to do during the week. And of course, people are going to be working, and it'd probably be hard for people to attend. But then again, NASCAR fans are going to go out of the way to try to be there for a race like that, especially if it's like a night race on a Wednesday night, middle of the week. Just take a good break from work for the entire part of the week, and just go out to see a NASCAR race and be able to enjoy it. And heck, even if it was just some kind of a showdown at like a short track, or maybe even at a restrictor place, just do another restrictor plate race. Maybe at the Daytona July race, have something else to do, just kind of to throw a little wrench in the season. I think that would be enjoyable for us, and of course the fans, and also for the drivers, because they always want to get back in behind the wheel of a car, including in the off season. I know they love a break, but they definitely want to be behind the wheel, and we see them practicing all the time because they want to be the best that they can be. So having just a race for either for fun, or maybe just some kind of a bonus race to add to the season that is just a little different from the schedule that we have, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I think if you get a summer race to do it, maybe you make it like football. You have one race on Sunday and you have the short weekend, you race Thursday night. And then you don't race that weekend, and then you wait until the following weekend to race again. I think that would work well. You do it during the summer, so there's no school to worry about, so you get more kids out to the race. Like if you look, you probably, maybe some tracks that could do it. Maybe you get Kentucky to do it. New Hampshire could do it. Maybe New Hampshire could do it. Maybe Dover, they move back. But again, you can't do a night race for them, so you can't really count them. Yeah, maybe the Daytona. Yeah, maybe do the Daytona night race on a Thursday, or maybe Chicagoland in the middle. It's a few tracks. I'm sure tracks would be willing to do it. It would definitely be different, especially if you get like a short. I think it'd be best with a short track. Because I feel like with a mile and a half, a mile and a half, I feel like you need the time to prepare. You need the whole weekend to kind of get your car set for a mile and a half. Short track, you kind of just you get there, and I mean, yeah, you do make changes and everything, get the car set. But I think it'll be the most exciting type of race, and they'll get the most fans out. Maybe a Richmond, if you move Richmond back a little bit until like June.
Oh, 100%. I was even looking at Darlington right there in September. So maybe that would be a good one too. And you threw out some great options. I think it would be just a nice little change, because it's, a lot of the times we would say there's too much change in NASCAR, but I think a change like that would be something that wouldn't get as much hate towards if there were to be something like that implemented into the season.
Yeah, and like you said before, people will get off work. They're going to have plenty of notice to decide all right, and they could take off or just work early work early, get out of work early or something. I mean, that's all you got to do. So maybe you have it after a Saturday night race, so they have an extra day to prepare or something. So you get Sunday, maybe you take Sunday off, Monday you load up, and then you get the track on Tuesday or maybe Wednesday, practice Wednesday, qualify Wednesday, or even qualify Thursday, like morning.
Oh, definitely.
And race Thursday night. I think it could work. It's definitely something I feel like they'll have to try it out to see how it goes. But, it's not like the NFL where like one team could play on Sunday and then have to play Thursday, and then the other team could have maybe coming off their bye week, so they're getting more of a rest. All the teams will be on the same, schedule. They're all racing Saturday night or Sunday, and then they have to come back again and race Thursday night. I think it would work. There's no disadvantage or advantage for anybody. You're all on the same schedule. You all have the same amount of time. And, yeah, just something to try out. Obviously, nothing to put in the playoffs, nothing to, change a championship, but definitely a summer race. I think it would be pretty cool to have a summer Thursday night race. Just some more changes maybe for NASCAR, moving ahead, maybe for the 2021 schedule. I know they're making a lot of changes for that season because, these tracks contracts, they're gone, they're up. So tracks can move their schedules, pretty freely in 2021.
Oh, definitely. And I think another thing too that I wanted to add was that looking at 2021, Wouldn't be surprised if we hear from some other tracks that are interested in maybe getting a race back on the schedule that may even be from a completely different racetrack, because I guess at one point we heard that Rockingham Speedway was doing renovations to their track and also to the outer parts to try to bring in more tourists towards that area. So maybe at some point, it might be later. I think that would be a little too soon, but wouldn't be surprised if we hear from maybe another racetrack. I don't know of any others at the moment that could be considered, but throw something out to maybe try to get on the schedule too. That would be something completely different and throw everything off, because we've had a lot of these tracks on the schedule for such a long time that seeing something new added would be maybe even a benefit to that as well.
Yeah, and we saw how much of a crowd it brought at Kentucky the first year. I mean, it was so many people that they couldn't handle the traffic.
Right.
So, a new track would definitely bring in some more fans, especially if it's in a location where there is no racetrack right now. So definitely, and just going to an inaugural race is just special just to be there. It's like you're witnessing history. You're seeing the first race. If Rockingham came back, you're seeing the first race at Rockingham since 2004.
Right.
So definitely, some interesting changes NASCAR's got to think about, and they've definitely got to keep, making some changes to update. You can't be running the same thing every year. You're going to lose some fans, if they keep seeing the same schedule every year. They want to see some new racetracks. You want to get these fans chances, go to a race. That's where you're getting most of your fans. If you've got a race at a track that's within a couple hours of a fan, that's how you're going to get their interest, is getting them to a race. That's definitely where it's definitely more fun to just be at the track. That's where you're going to, get a new fan, is at the racetrack. It's kind of hard to get them on TV, by watching on TV. It's definitely, you get someone to experience how it's like at the track. You're definitely going to get the fan, and get them watching some more.
Oh, 100%. You look at the Roval too, just how they changed that, and the past two Roval races have been two of the best. And now, I don't know what the size is or how many seats that they've had filled, but I feel like just these new kind of a little change, as you mentioned, a little change can go a long way.
Yeah, and speaking of change, we do have some change in the 36 car. This has been one of the what I've been saying all year, the most irrelevant car in the field. I always forget Matt Tifft is in the field. I really do. I'll see his name and I'm like, oh yeah, he's in the Cup Series. And now he won't be racing the remainder of the season. Matt Crafton drove for him at Martinsville after he suffered, I believe it was a seizure. So he'll probably be out about 4 to 6 months, Matt Tifft. And so now you got John Hunter Nemecheck, who's being called up to race the final 3 races in a 36 car. Definitely no expectations for John Hunter Nemecheck. It's an underfunded team at Front Row Motorsports. You can't expect much out of him, and he still hasn't made a Cup start. So really no expectations for him. If he could just keep the car in one piece and run all the laps, I think that would be the best ideal scenario for that team.
Oh, definitely. I think you're spot on with that. If you look at John Hunter Nemechek too, throughout his career, he's, especially in the Truck Series and when you look at the Xfinity Series, besides his time at Chip Ganassi, I mean, he was driving for the Nemco Motorsports team for years and years, and he, I guess, over-exceeded expectations in that truck, winning a lot of races and looking very, very strong during their seasons, even though they had numerous DNFs. And then GMS and Xfinity has never really been the strongest team. As we saw with Spencer Gallagher, his first year, I mean, he finished 19th in points, looked better in 2018, but then, of course, had his struggles after getting kicked out of the ride. But Nemechek hasn't really had the best season, but then again, GMS Racing in Xfinity isn't really the strongest team and has never really been a strong team when you look in the Xfinity Series. So I think he's done well for what equipment he's had given to him, and getting an opportunity to race these last 3 races hopefully will be good for him. But like you said, not a lot of expectations, more of just going out there and performing. But definitely, aside from that, definitely sending Matt Tifft thoughts and prayers. I bet he'd appreciate that. He's unfortunate for him that he's having this go on, because I feel like the second half of the season has been a lot better for him in the 36. I know you said that it's kind of been He's kind of one of the more forgettable guys, but he's had some pretty strong runs. He did good at Richmond and also good at Talladega. And you look back at Daytona, he was able to get his first top 10, which is pretty solid for that team. Front row hasn't really had the best year, all kind of in the back half of the points, but definitely think of Matt Tifft, hoping he gets ready and healthy for next year, because I know that this is just not what he was looking forward to, seeing that the year hasn't really been the best and that now he has to sit out for 3 races at the end of the year, but hoping he gets better and they get him back in the car and have a better 2020 season there in the 36.
Yeah, definitely. Thoughts, prayers to Matt Tifft, like you said. Definitely an unfortunate situation for a nice guy. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's sometimes just being quiet is good. You're not making any trouble on the racetrack. You're not making any enemies. He's just kind of been minding his own. And like you said, he's definitely picked it up in the second half of the season. Definitely learning a lot. And, I feel like, maybe he sets himself up for a ride opportunity here if some of these guys don't start performing up at, major rides. It would be pretty cool to see if he can get back for the Daytona 500. But if not, definitely want to, you definitely want to, err on the side of caution. Definitely don't want to rush back and have something, life-threatening happen. Definitely don't want that for Matt Tifft. But it'll be interesting to see what John Hunter Nemechek does in his last 3 races. He could, maybe prove something to some teams. And, he definitely, I think John Hunter Nemechek is all but set up for the 2 car next year, from what I've heard. Richard Childress Racing for the Xfinity Series. So we could see John Hunter Nemechek run for a top team next season, and we'll really see what he's made of.
I actually didn't know that John Hunter was kind of intending on doing that, so that might be good for him. But I think it'll be good, and a little bit of seat exposure in the Monster Energy Cup Series, because there is a good chance in a few more years, if some opportunities open up, or heck, maybe for the 36, if Matt Tifft decides not to return, because of course Caesars are in the brain, and every hit in NASCAR is going to impact the brain in some form or another. You never know what kind of opportunities might arise. So, hoping John Hunter Nemechek is able to prove something these next 3 races. But then again, you want to see Matt Tifft be able to return, because, like you mentioned, he is a quiet guy. And he's not really the best in the field, but he is consistent, as we saw in his 2018 season in the Xfinity Series. And he's been able to do what he can for a 3rd front row motorsports car. But definitely hoping he gets better from this. And I guess we'll have to see kind of what plans are made during the off season. I feel like we're going to hear a lot about some of the silly season stuff kind of finish up here in the late half of the year. But I think that the one person we're going to have to wait on the longest is to see Matt Tifft and what his plan is for 2020, because that's probably going to be delayed a little bit. But I think everything else will kind of hear up earlier in these next few races and next few couple months, I would say.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see what happens. And going into this weekend at Texas, based off the spring race, the race wasn't too bad. Definitely, some opportunities to pass, not as much. Definitely better than when Texas was first repaved and reconfigured in turns 1 and 2. It was really single file racing. Now I think they're adding some of the sticky stuff, up toward the outside line to try to build that in this weekend to create some multi-groove racing at Texas. And, clean air is definitely going to be, key, as it is at most of the 1.5-mile tracks. So I think track position is going to be key. I'll take track position over tires there. I think the leaders, in the spring, they took 2 tires at the end and they held on to win. Just like Hamlin did a couple weeks ago at Kansas. Texas, these playoff drivers, you're looking at, Hamlin's 24 above the cut. But, say someone like Chase Elliott wins, then Hamlin's only 10 above the cut over Logano. So, yeah, definitely can't play anything safe. Got to try to maximize these stage points to your max and, try to win if you can. If you're Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, you're not safe. you got to do as much as you can. You almost got to play it as if you're behind. You got to be aggressive. Can't be relaxed. You can't be, if you got a chance to get some stage points, don't pass on it. I think you got to play.
100%.
You got to play stages more than race win early in the race.
Oh, I definitely agree, and especially when we're talking about Texas. You look at the guy that's always been up front at Texas out of the entire field, and that's Kevin Harvick, and he's the first guy outside of the top four, and he's been the most dominant over the past few years when it comes to Texas. Even though he has won twice, of course, but he's finished in the top 10 every single time these past 5 races, and he's led more laps than any other driver here. It's a track that's always suited him well. Back to when they first started running Texas, it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to be able to fare when you've got these other hungry playoff drivers trying to find their way, as you mentioned, into the top 4, or even just maintaining their spot in the top 4, like the Logano or the Denny Hamlin or Kyle Busch. But Texas will be an interesting track. I think that we'll see a lot from the playoff drivers because this is a track that has always suited them more well than others. And that includes Chase Elliott, who, of course, is like 44 points back, but he's always been pretty consistent near the front of the field here. But I'm looking forward to it. I think we'll see a good battle here, maybe more here than we will at ISM, but it'll be very interesting to see how things play out.
Yeah, definitely going to be a fun race. Playoff-wise, stage points will definitely set up what we're looking at after stage 2, going into that final stretch for the run. And, my playoff drivers to steer clear from this week are going to be, you might be surprised here, Kyle Larson. He has an average finish of, I believe, 20.4. It's one of his worst. He actually, gets in more incidents, here than other tracks. And Joey Logano. I think Joey Logano, he's had some issues here the past couple of years. He hasn't shown to me, that he's been the best at the mile and a halves. That Penske program has been kind of lacking at the mile and a halves this year. So I think Joey Logano, he's going to have to step it up this week, or he could be in trouble and below the cut line here after Texas.
I think those are 2 good picks, and it's funny because Kyle Larson, it may not be one of his best averages, but he tends to run well here. It's just he gets caught up in a lot of, I guess, issues later in the race that kind of hurt his momentum. But when he is up front, he is able to contend for the win. But I would say my playoff driver to watch out for this week is also Joey Logano. As you mentioned, just hasn't really shown the speed that we've seen out of the car. And when we look at the rest of his finishes this year, and especially in the playoffs, just the playoffs alone, he was running well, but he wasn't able to get the finishes that he needed to. And there might be a lot of emotions that carry over from last week at Martinsville that carry into this Texas race that could hurt him. But again, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in that situation. And I think I'm going to give the second one's a hard one to go with, but I might go with Ryan Blaney. Unfortunately, Ryan Blaney, my favorite driver in the field, but his inconsistency has always been a big issue, and we've seen inconsistency from him in the past few races. We saw him crash out at Dover, but win at Talladega. We saw him not run well at Kansas, or run well at Kansas, but have problems late that hurt him, and then Martinsville consistently at the top. And he's already had quite a bit of DNFs this year, especially earlier on in the season. And we thought, as you mentioned too, the Penske drivers haven't really been doing as well as they should at these mile and a halves. And unfortunately, Ryan Blaney has performed the worst, I think, out of the bunch. Of course, he did have the pole here and do pretty well last year in both of the Texas races. But I feel like his inconsistency this year alone might hurt him when we get here. But it's going to be important for them to excel. And I think that some of these playoff drivers are probably going to maybe push too hard and get themselves into some kind of trouble at some point during the race, which can hurt their playoff chances. But I do think that Ryan Blaney and Logano are 2 as well to look out for.
Yeah, definitely. And, we'll wrap up here with read winners predictions. Oh, we'll start with you, Wes. Who you got winning this weekend in Texas?
So I was first leaning towards Kyle Larson, and I know that he said that that's the guy that you're kind of looking out for when it comes to it. But I feel like if he can just put it together, he's got a good chance to go out and get a victory here. But then again, I'm not going him. My final pick in the end is I feel like I just kind of go with the past a little bit too much, but I feel like Kevin Harvick. I just think Kevin Harvick is going to be able to find his way into the playoffs because these last three races, he has finished inside the top 10 every single for the past I think, 7 out of 9 years. He's finished in the top 10 in each of these three races, and he has swept both of the last two Texas races. It's just a track that has always been good on his schedule. He's never really had a bad run here without having some kind of mechanical problem or a crash. He's always competing in the top 5 for the victory. And I think that Kevin Harvick is going to be able to win his third straight, but I'm a little worried that there's a chance maybe somebody could pull a little bit of a spoiler, and it may not be anybody from the playoffs because Eric Jones has always run good at Texas. You look at Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson had the pole earlier in the season, and he's done pretty well when it comes to the mile and a halves, even though he hasn't had a lot of top tens to prove it. But he has run well, especially at Texas. And then you look at guys like William Byron having an increasingly growing year of progression that we've seen out of this young guy. He's done well at Texas. And imagine if he's able to, the year he's had, he's made so many improvements, he could be able to run up at the top five or 10. So look for some of those guys to maybe pull a spoiler victory out. But I am going to go Kevin Harvick in the end as my pick to win the race.
So I'm going to go, I'll do what you did. I'll pick, I'm going to start with my non-playoff driver that could win. I'm going to go William Byron. William Byron has definitely stepped it up. He ran a great race at Martinsville. He was the only one that could keep up with Martin Truex Jr. there at the end. William Byron's knocking on the door of that first win. And by the way, I did write an article today about William Byron. He's nearing that first Cup win. So if you haven't gone and read it, go check it out on Belly Up Sports. Or you can go to the Belly Up Racing page on Twitter, and you'll be able to see the article I wrote about William Byron, his first win. Definitely a good read. Go check that one out. And, Byron Chackenhouse is a 7-time winner at this racetrack with Jimmy Johnson, so he definitely knows what it takes to get it done here. And William Byron, I think he's been, he's due to win. I don't think he's going to take 100 races like Chase Elliott did. I think he could win this week, maybe at ISM. If not, I think he'll win early next year. And for my pick this week, I'm going to go with Kyle Busch. I think Kyle Busch is due for a win. I think Kyle Busch is going to snap out of it. I think he has the ability to just snap out of whatever lull he's in. It's crazy we're talking about Kyle Busch in a lull, and he's still 17 points up on the cut line right now. I think Kyle Busch snaps his winless streak. I think he wins this week. I'm looking to go to back-to-back. I picked Martin Truex Jr. last week to win, and he did. So Kyle Busch, I think, will win this race. He's so good at Texas. I think he had the spring race won until he got up into the wall with about 50 laps to go. Don't be surprised if you see Kyle Busch driving the victory lane, lock himself into the championship 4. And he's another one. I swear I think he's made the championship 4 every year since 2015.
He has. That's crazy, too, to think about how consistent he has been.
He's only missed it the first year of the playoffs. So crazy what Kyle Busch has been able to do. It's hard to imagine him not being in the championship 4, and I think he'll win at Texas. Getting that second Gibbs car in the field. At Homestead, I think it's going to be a good race. I think we could expect some controversy of some sort. Kyle Busch is going to win. Do you have any last thoughts here, Wes?
I do like your Kyle Busch pick as a victory too. I mean, he's always run good at Texas as well. He has won twice there, both in the spring, hasn't won in the fall. I'm not sure if he's ever won in the fall, but he is definitely going to be a threat, and I think that Kyle Busch is going to be hungry to get up there and fight his way into the championship, which he has done, of course, every single year, which is impressive since 2015. And 2015, man, that was that time he had the injury and was still able to win the championship. So I think everything is shaping up to have a good Final Four, and I think the Final Four is going to be extremely strong when we go to Homestead, because you look at half these drivers, half of them have always fared well in the end, and that's because these are their better tracks, and they always show up and they perform, whether it be in the final or this round or the Final Four. But I think that's pretty much it for me. I'm looking forward to the race that we have in Texas, and curious to see who's going to make the Final Four in a couple weeks post Homestead or post Phoenix and make it to Homestead. So definitely looking forward to it, and I'm excited for some racing this Sunday.
Gonna be a fun weekend here in Texas. Look out for the playoffs on Sunday. Got the playoffs on Saturday with the Xfinity Series. Be interesting to see how the Big Three does there. But for Wes, I'm Dom Cass from Belly Up Racing, Belly Up Sports. Check us out, the Steer Clear Podcast. You can also check us out over on Twitter at Steer Clear Pod. Thank you for listening, and we will see you guys next week to talk about Texas and preview ISM. Have a good one.